Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I am Abe with MysticGenMara.com, a small town mystic from the middle of Idaho. And tonight we're going to work into our ongoing series of Myth and Tarot. And we're going to wander back to when our hero, I guess you could call him, Hercules, and his 12 labors. The fourth labor is where we're headed this evening, and this particular labor was with a pig. Yes, that is what you heard, is a pig. So, the Erymanthus Boar was a task that Hercules had to deal with after he captured and then, oopsie, released the hind. Let's find out why this boar was such a pest and why he needed to be removed or dealt with. And then we'll see where our hero, or maybe the anti-hero, Hera, shows up, because, you know, she's always lurking around somewhere, especially when we talk about Hercules. The boar was said to be of vast weight, and apparently he was rabid, because it is said that he foamed from the mouth. That sounds fun. Something along the lines of this monstrosity. Kind of, you know, not the most pleasant thing. He was said to be shaggy and unkempt, a rather nasty and smelly critter, which if you've been around pigs, they're not really that fragrant. They don't smell that great to start with, and I don't care how clean you keep them, they have an aroma that's just not pleasant. There are some that say this boar was just a regular old wild piggy with attitude. But what fun is that? That doesn't make for a good story. I mean, you could take that out with an arrow. That's not fun. So we're gonna go with Behemoth over here. This is what, as I read through the stories, this is what I see. Because if we're gonna do it, like, do it right. The boar lived on the mountain that carried the same name, the Erymanthus mountain. And obviously this boar's lair was midway up towards the top of the mountain. And he also liked to roam the marshes and glens around the base of the mountain. And apparently, this boar had we'll call it a nasty habit. He liked to barrel down the mountains, trashing everything in his path. And then once he destroyed a path down the mountain, because, you know, you have to build a new one each time you come down, he decided that the town next to his mountain was next. And it wasn't enough just to tear down a few trees and cause some chaos in the fields. He had to chase a few farmers too, and if you could only imagine being caught by one of those boar's tusks, the farmer was not doing so great at that point. You know, good old tusk to the guts doesn't sound fun, but so the king that Hercules was basically enslaved to for 12 years to do these 12 tasks sent Hercules to catch and bring them in the murderous boar. Did this king ever learn? No, actually he didn't, because we know there was 12 labors and he didn't learn through any of them. Hercules decided to stop after he was sent off on this mission to visit an old friend named Pholus. And Pholus has shown up before when we talked about the centaurs. Because Pholus was a centaur. And he stopped to visit to kind of get an idea of like how to deal with this boar, because Pholus lived near to, not really close, but near to where the boar lived. And this actually turned into a really bad decision for, well, everybody. Hercules, after having dined with Pholus, decided he was going to open a wine cask, a wine jar, a lot of different names there. The problem was the wine wasn't one person's. Pholus kind of held the wine for the centaurs as a whole. So, and centaurs had really sensitive noses, and if you remember, you can go back and check out the video on centaurs. They have this really bad habit with alcohol. They can smell it from miles away and they come rushing to find it, and they don't do well when they drink. And so Hercules pops open this wine jar, and all the other centaurs smell it. They eventually show back up, get into a huge upset because Pholus let Hercules take wine, didn't invite them, and so they burst into the wine repository, basically. Stole a bunch of wine, got all drunk, started getting angry. Of course, centaurs like to fight. And so fights ensued, and many of these centaurs decided that who's the best person to pick on? Hercules. Not the wisest decision, but that's what they thought. And so by the time this was all said and done with, there were many, many, many injured and dying or dead centaurs, including, sadly enough, his friend Pholus, but also because Chiron was roaming around there, and I don't know how he got tied up with this, because he's wasn't known to be a drunkard, as bad as the rest of them were, but he ended up getting injured by one of those wonderful poison-tipped arrows that Hercules had at this time. And Hercules was very upset over the death of Pholus, his friend, and so he proceeded to bury and pay due respects, and Chiron would beg Hercules to do something to have his immortality removed or some way healed. Not that she could be healed from Hydra blood, but that was the thought. It was just make the pain stop. And Hercules would petition those on Olympia to remove the immortality and free Chiron from this pain. And eventually Chiron was released from his torture and placed amongst the stars. And before Chiron left the physical, because he wanted to thank Hercules for getting the gods to grant him his request, he told Hercules how he would have to catch the boar. It was not going to be an easy task, but Chiron told him that if he couldn't catch it through normal means, chasing it down, stabbing a spear in it, shooting with an arrow, however, that he wanted to drive it into the deep snow, and for some reason the boar would not be able to escape this. And so that's where we're headed next. After putting his friend respectively to the ground and handing Chiron over to the gods, Hercules would head off to deal with the boar. Personally, use your grief to fuel your inner warrior. Get that boar, and that's kind of how you have to live life. If things go wrong, find a way to channel it into something constructive, however that works out for you. And Chiron shows up only in like one or two of these visions. I like Chiron personally. He's in my birth charts. This comet is, so I make sure to reference him when I see him. And there a lot of the other ones, they don't talk about Chiron, and they say that Pholus was the one that told Hercules before he got drunk the way to capture the boar. Like I said, there's a couple of variations. I mean, this was written probably 2,500 years ago, at least modern versions of it at least 1,500 years ago, so you can pick and choose which version you would prefer. But I'm here to kind of give an overview, so to speak. And so once he figured out how to catch it, anyone have any ideas on how hard it was to find the boar? I mean, think about it. He's kind of a big critter. It really wasn't that hard. Follow the path of destruction. The great beast was snorting and rooting around when Hercules came upon him, and the boar was causing such a ruckus that it apparently could be heard from many, many miles away. The boar was hungry. He was always hungry, so he was, rooting around trying to find something to eat, a root, tuber, a person, whatever, trying to find something to eat. And Hercules eventually snuck up on this monstrosity, and I'm guessing it was probably not that hard. It was making a lot of noise on its own, and there's some other ideas here that I'll mention. Hercules started shouting and banging his shield, is one story, but shouting for sure, making lots of noise, causing a lot of ear chaos. The boar was so startled that he took off running. The reason is, in reality, nothing had ever chased the great boar. Nothing had ever went after this particular pig. So having something come at him making that much noise probably made his heart skip a beat or 50. So once he took off, the chase was on. Hercules would chase this boar around the base of the mountain through the swamps several times. Eventually the boar was like, I'm done. I'm heading to my lair halfway up the mountain. So he headed up the mountain, which is exactly what Hercules wanted. Hercules would chase him up the mountain. The boar didn't want to reveal its lair, so it dove into a thicket patch. And if you've ever seen thickets, picture Sleeping Beauty, what Maleficent puts around the tower, very thick thorns. Thickets aren't pleasant, just in general. And that's kind of the way that they've described it in the story of this fourth labor. This was a very good place to hide because not much could get through it. Well, Hercules didn't want to stab himself getting into the thicket to chase out the boar, so he took his spear and started stabbing it through the brush, trying to hit the boar. And he eventually did poke him. Good little goose there. And Hercules, when he made contact with his sharpened spear, the boar would shriek. Could only imagine that sound. Actually, I don't want to. And it would run out of the thicket and further up the mountain, trying to get away from this thing that was chasing him and stabbing him. Like, the boar was not thrilled. So Hercules kept chasing him up the mountain, and the top of this particular mountain is covered in snow. So Chiron had instructed Hercules on how to catch this thing, and Hercules was like, to the top, we're taking you up there, we're going to get you buried. The boar was exhausted from the chase, so when he came to the deep snow berms, he couldn't plod his way through and eventually buried himself in the snow. And if you've ever tried to walk through deep snow, not on skis and not on snowshoes, just knee deep even, try walking through knee deep snow and see how far you get. It's exhausting, and you're going to catch your feet on nothing really, and it's awkward, it's difficult. So imagine something that weighs as much as a wild boar, especially, we'll bring this image up here again, this thing. And so he gets trapped in the deep snow and can't move and can't get away. By this point, because of all the running, and most of the stories say this particular race had been going on for days by the time Hercules finally got him to the snow. So there was no fight left in this poor boar. Hercules would wrap the boar in, depending on the story, a great net. He would truss him up with chains. However, the story, depending on which story you read, and then once he was trussed, he would take him back to the king. The story goes that Hercules carried the injured boar over his left shoulder. He literally hoisted him and just kind of tossed him over his shoulder. The boar wasn't little. Again, you can see the trees in the picture, or in the painting. Trees this big, boar this big. So this is a huge boar, but what's the strength of a demigod if you can't tote around monstrosities once in a while, right? So Hercules, down the mountain he went. I'm sure he took a break at one point just to it's over, I can take a breath. I mean, that was chasing a boar around a mountain I could not imagine would be an easy task. And so he started heading into town. Of course, remember, the king was terrified of Hercules, and so he would not let Hercules into the town. Although there's one painting an artist did, and I find it highly entertaining. Let's see if I can make it just a hair bit bigger here so you can see it. He actually takes the boar into the palace. Takes it into the palace, and you can see everyone's like scattering, and I was like, that's amazing. And in theory, if you look over here, there's a vase, and then there's a person standing next to the vase. That's important here in a second. When Hercules came in view of the city, there was blood pouring down his back, because remember, he'd stabbed the boar at one point, so the boar was bleeding still. I mean, being jostled around as you're being trucked across the countryside is not going to allow a scab to form properly. And so he's got this blood pouring all the way down him. There's a very, very angry, hostile boar draped over his shoulders. And I could only imagine the sight. Like, this does really good interpretation of, like, have that come walking into your town, right? And the king was terrified. King Erymanthus was a massive coward. Because remember, after the lion event, he had a specific type of bronze vessel or container built so that he could hide in it when Hercules would come around. Like, like I said, heat big, strong king here. And so he had dove into his bronze vessel, slammed the door shut, and this king is brave enough to send Hercules on all of these death trips. But when Hercules comes back, which you shouldn't be surprised by this, he's terrified and goes and hides. Like, Hera was not super supportive here. She'd hoped that the boar would outsmart Hercules. Not sure how that would work, but don't get me wrong. They've done the research. Boars are smart. They have the mental capacity of like a 3-year-old child. But Hercules at this point was like in his late 40s, and he was a demigod, and like, come on, Hera, give him some credit. And she wasn't super happy with the king at this point, and so the story goes that she was absolutely furious that Hercules had survived again, and she wasn't really thrilled that the king was hiding in a pot either. So there's that. So at this point, we just have Hercules dragging an injured and very, very angry boar into town. And legend has it that the king was so terrified of the boar, because it was still alive even though he asked for it to be brought in alive, he demanded that Hercules get rid of it. And of course, old stories, modern interpretations, we have 2 different versions. And I poked around because I was like, only 2 on this, but there's literally only 2 options that I found. If there's another one, let me know. One, it doesn't look like it was killed. There is lore associated with this story that the boar was actually an immortal, so it couldn't be killed anyway. And it's implied in this version that Hercules took it back to the wilds away from civilization and released it, since Hercules had been receiving aid from Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and the wilds. He didn't want to anger her further, considering he already kind of captured her hinds, and not the best look, so he decided that that's what he would do. That's the version we're gonna go with, because that's the one that makes the most sense. The alternative, which I've only found this in 2 locations, and I dug around a fair amount trying to flesh the story out a little bit more, because there's not as much with detail with this one. The king and Hercules, I found this, and it's a painting on a pot. It's kind of funny. The king is hiding in his pot, and Hercules is dripping boar blood over the top of the king in his pot, and the king's freaking out, screaming, "Get rid of the boar!" And this image to me ties into the second story of what happened to the boar. I just thought this was funny, because I really am not a fan of this stupid king. And I mean, he might have been powerful in his day, but you keep sending someone out to die, they keeps coming back, and you are keep being afraid of it. Like, demigod, what part of that are you missing? But part 2 of story is Hercules would, instead of releasing the boar, take it outside the city limits, butcher and barbecue the boar, and all the city would feast on this monstrosity. And that's also the reason I think it was a lot bigger than what modern interpretations are, because this wasn't a small city, this was a fairly sizable capital city. So for the whole city to be able to eat off this one boar 4 days, that's not a small animal. Just saying. The tusks and the skull possibly were placed in the temple of Apollo, and this is not an accurate thing, because the lore, it's merely suggested, is the phrasing of the boar, tusks and skull. There's one place where there's a theory that because they found some random boar's head, but it was a standard-sized boar head in the Temple of Apollo, it had to have been from this time period. Okay. Weirdly enough, though, this is not the end of the boar. That's kind of the reason I say part 1, where Hercules took it out to the wild away from humanity and released it. I would laugh if he released it in the Olympian palaces. just because. because the boar shows back up in modern times. A couple of different places, actually. The TV series that I reference frequently when we talk about Hercules, the legend continues with Kevin Sorbo. Is that right? No. Legendary Journeys. Ha ha ha. I'm funny. With Kevin Sorbo, and then we also see the boar showed up in the Disney animated Hercules TV show, not the movie that I remember, but I do remember seeing this little thing that looked like a triangle with teeth in the TV show many moons ago on that one. What's interesting is there's references to the God of War series as having a giant hog in it that people have assumed was the Erymanthus Boar, but it actually is named in the Assassin's Creed video games, specifically in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. He also shows up in the Percy Jackson books, and there are references, usually if you have Hercules and the 12 Labors referenced in a novel, he's probably got the boar showing up there too. But I couldn't find specific titles. That's my assumption. So, but that's where we're at with the Erymanthus Boar. It's kind of an interesting one when you think about it, because everything else is preternatural. You've got the hydras, and you've got the massive lions that are 5 times larger than a normal lion, and all of these other monsters. We haven't gone through all of them yet, obviously, but you've got all these different things, and then there's just this random angry boar roaming around out in the middle of a mountain somewhere that the king wants disposed of. So you're not, to me anyway, this is my personal opinion here, it's not that special of a creature out of the themes that we've discussed and went over so far. But it is an immortal, it is sacred to Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, so it deserves its place in history for that alone, And with that, we'll hop over to our tarot spread. I used just the general Celtic cross for this, and this is for fun. It's as if the boar was not crazy trying to eat somebody, sitting across the table from me, where you, the viewer, are currently sitting. And if I was to do a reading for the boar, this is what it would look like. So, and we're just, like I said, it's for fun. It's a way to kind of give us a little bit more modern day, if you want to call it, new insights into some of these ancient monstrosities and creatures. So we'll get the cards laid out here, and your significator card for the Erymanthus Boar is the 4 of Pentacles. There's some help coming in, but it's help in not a way that the boar would anticipate, which this is probably Artemis coming in, because even though she was a huntress, she valued nature. Don't take more than you needed. And with this card, what I'm seeing is there's some unexpected help, and it's coming in a time where you're feeling a little bit, because I'm seeing this one is the boar and that one is Artemis. So the boar is kind of like, I don't know what's really going on here, and Artemis is like, trust me, we got this. And it's very much about the earthly realm. Pentacles is the everyday world, and so with this one, it's about kind of a survival thing, like, you're not smart enough to survive on your own, let me take you under my wing, and we will show you a better path. And that's the significator. So the boar is under the protection of Artemis, and it's being shown a better way to exist versus chasing through town all the time. The thing that's crossing it, well, that's interesting, is the 3 of Swords. And I have this weird feeling that this one's Hera, and I don't know why I feel that, but I really strongly see this one as Hera, and this one is like the female version of the king, like, but mommy, we do good work. And that's what's crossing it, is Hera's like, again, 3 of Swords, you're cutting away things, you're kind of revealing some truth. The truth, and how I'm seeing this, is that Hera's looking at the king going, dude, I am asking you to do something, quote unquote, simple, and you just can't figure it out. And this energy is what's crossing To this day, the boar, Hera's still trying to figure out how to get her way. She wanted things to be dealt with a certain way because it would take out, well, first the creature, but also Hercules. And so in this aspect, you've got her just kind of like, I can just see her rolling her eyes like, why is this so difficult? Well, first of all, he's the son of Zeus, so right there he's going to be slippery as an eel. But you also have to remember he's a demigod, and with the human interaction as well, you've got a weird mix of intelligences there. Hera underestimates humanity way more than she should, and it tends to make her look goofy. So, the higher self of the boar is the Seven of Chalices. The boar actually has a really good sense of self. There's this image that is coming forward with this, that the boar has self-confidence, like he knows he's worth something, because you wouldn't have all these people fighting over him if he wasn't. And there's also this weird maturity that I'm coming, especially this late in the game. Like, the story we talked about was, several, we'll say 1500 to 2000 years ago, maybe longer. The dates are a little relevant in my world. So you have the Seven of Chalices. He's matured a little bit, but there's still a little bit of sadness. So his higher influences, his higher self vibe is, there's been some maturation, growing up type of energy, but there's still a sadness, like being forgotten, being hunted, being trapped away from society. Because in the version of it that I'm choosing to go with, Hercules took him away from everything that he knew and kind of cast him away, which is fine. Boars need to be out in the woods, not in cities. But he's kind of lonely because everything that he was familiar with is still gone. And if he's wandering like the story talks about, he's wandering like he's lost, not like he's having fun, or not like he's home. So his subconscious, gotta edit this picture, his subconscious or lower self, his shadow, is escapism. The Six of Swords, it's frivolous, it's devil may care, but it's really about, there's an illusion here, and I'm going to keep the illusion even though there's something trying to cut it away. It's an incomplete view of the world that is tainting his ability to create a better life. It could be also preventing the boar from finding a partner, because it's never referenced if he was the only one. And the other part in the main story, as I was digging around, there's no parentage given to this thing. So where did it come from? There had to have been another one somewhere. And that's kind of the subconscious shadow aspect of, you know what, to heck with it, I don't really care what's going on, but it's also hiding reality from itself. So, its immediate past, and it's an immortal, we'll go back 200 years or so, is the Nine of Swords. It is a very, the Nine of Swords is saying, adjust a little bit more here, Nine of Swords is saying that this is not a good place for this creature. He's almost borderline wanting to be self-harming, because in the past, because he's alone, things are changed, he's been injured and drug off in the middle of nowhere, laughed at, mocked, being, couldn't hurt the people he wanted to hurt because that's what he did. And then he was thrown out again, away from what he knew. So his history is not the great. He almost at one point would have, if he was more sentient, would have probably asked the Olympians to remove him. That's where he was at. He was not in a good place, going back in time a little bit here. His immediate future, next 200 years or so, there's something new beginning. He's got the Fool coming forward. So this is a shifting in perspective. This is a shifting in life. His future, he's once again in his little naive tra-la-la world. So his future is showing there's something new coming in. There's some maybe broader aspects. Instead of just being a monster in a video game, he might actually start to incorporate into broader perspectives and flesh out his story better. So you've got some new things coming forward for our beat up boar here. His current attitude, like the things going through his head, is the King of Swords. He's the old warhorse. He's been there. He's done that. He's conquered. He's tired. His attitude is just literally, I've been there. I've done that. I'm tired. I want to sleep. And so he's just the energy that's coming off of his attitude is more, can I just rest for a minute? Because he doesn't feel, since he's not at home, in a home and familiar environment, he just keeps going and going and going. So it's like he's ready just to take a break. And this new energy of the Fool coming in could be the thing that he needed to revamp his vibe a little bit. So his environment is the One of Swords. There's a little bit of darkness where he's at right now. It's not the most comfortable place. He's feeling like a foreigner in a distant land type thing. But it's because he has an illusion placed upon him. And what I'm seeing here is he's feels like he's not where he was supposed to be. But in reality, the mountain that he lived on really wasn't where he was supposed to be. He was supposed to be under the care of Athena, or Artemis, not Athena. And so he's back where he's supposed to be, but he doesn't realize it yet. That's that feeling like a foreigner in a distant land. But the illusion is the fact that he feels that way. The reality is he's where he's supposed to be. His hopes and fears, the Ten of Swords, fears of this being his life for eternity, not being able to grow from it, not being able to expand beyond it. But his hope is that he's able to succeed and grow further. The Erymanthus Boar, his hope is that people will remember him, even if you can't say his name correctly, but will remember and go back and look at in his mind, the great things he did, just, terrorizing the peasants in the villages, but not looking at it from the fact that he was just another, in his opinion, victim of Hercules. But again, he's where he's supposed to be. He's being guided by Artemis, so I'm not really sure what, he's got that illusionary blind pulled across his eye, so he's not seeing things as clearly as he should. The outcome where he ends up now is the number 6. It is the Lover's card. So he's going in the right direction. His overall outcome from all of this is, for the Boar, is definitely going to be a positive one. It's basically saying he is where he's supposed to be. If he could remove the blinders of his foreigner in a foreign land, of his environment, if he could remove that blinder and see the truth, remove the illusion, because he's in the fields of Artemis, he's in the place where she runs, that's where he's supposed to be. And if he could remove those outcomes, he might actually find himself a partner in the midst of all that, because he's a boar, so there should be at least a sow somewhere running around out there, right? And that's the vibe I'm getting from the outcome card, because it's the Lovers, meaning there's a partnership, there's a friendship, but they're saying that this could be definitely a more amorous event for him. So overall, looks like the Boar's not had the greatest history. Nothing in his past, in his subconscious, in his fears is saying he's had a good past. His past has been rough. And his obstacles, the things that are crossing him, Hera and all of that, he knows that he has to run and hide. But the upside is where he's at is where he's supposed to be. And his overall outcome is actually really positive, because the Lovers is saying your outcome is literally you are going to have a partnership. You're going to make a connection with, could be a demigod, it could be with another pig of some form, but he's moving into a better place if he would just see it as that. So, and I know these are kind of silly and fun, but it's a way to kind of give us a little bit of an insight, a different view, so to speak, of our various monsters and creatures in mythology. And with that, if you enjoy these type of videos, please hit that subscribe button, drop a like on the video, comment down below, let me know thoughts, feelings, opinions. Like I said, for the next little bit, we'll probably keep going with the 12 labors of Hercules, and we'll bounce through those. I think we're about 5 or 6 now, so we'll finish those up, and then maybe we'll just stick with the Greece theme and start going through some of the other main deities of Olympia, because there are a lot of our modern day myths, legends, and stories come from specifically the Greek Olympian legends and lore. So maybe get to know our Olympian deities a little bit, since we're already headed that direction anyway. And we'll flesh out some of them, why Hercules is kind of a hit or miss hero, why I think Hera's one of the worst things that ever happened in Olympia, she has some reasoning, but how she goes about things isn't the best. So we'll get into all that later. With that, I'll let you guys go. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next video. Button, who's got, there it is.